Do you know what Gwaan, where you can get news about the Jamaican culture and just learn about how Jamaicans are doing, as I said, yard and abroad?
You get to learn a new Jamaican patois word or even a Jamaican phrase.
I look forward to the patois word of the day.
The patois word is pasa pasa.
Word today is taco ram.
Our word of the day is duffy.
Twang. No little twang. Not true.
I enjoy tuning in to What a Gwaan.
It happens every Friday at 7 p.m. So check them out. And bye from Toronto.
Dans Québec et la Jamaïque, écoute What a Gwaan. Yes, What a Gwaan.
I am a big fan of What a Gwaan.
Relevant and entertaining, so keep up the good work.
Watch What a Gwaan.
Big up yourself. What a Gwaan.
What a Gwaan. Yes, What a Gwaan.
Watch What a Gwaan.
Always say I'm going to walk one in a yard. Check it out. 7 p.m. every Friday. Hello, and hello, my peoples in our What a Gwaan land. Oh, no, do. It's Friday, October 6th, and you know who is back once it reaches Friday at this time? Oh, yeah, it's your girl from Bongo Town back for another day, for another session of What a Gwaan National. Welcome back. I hope all of y'all's week was good. So now that we've started, it's time for you to go outside, go at the gate, go at the back door, the front door, on the veranda, wherever it is that you need to go. It's time for you to let everybody know that What a Gwaan is on, and your favorite host, the girl from Bongo Town, is back for another Friday. We want to say a special shout out to those listening on Fresh FM Radio London. And to also let you know that What a Gwaan is also available as a podcast on Spotify, Podbeam, Google, Amazon, HiHeart, Player FM, and all other major podcasting platforms. You can connect to any one of these platforms on the link on our website. And our website is www.whatagwaan.ca. Welcome to October. So all the October-born folks, time to skip around. In this part of the world, the season is pumpkin season. You can get pumpkin pie, pumpkin scone, pumpkin latte, and all things pumpkiny. And it is also the month they celebrate Halloween. Yep, it's the last month for the season 2023 of What a Gwaan National. Yes, my people, time to wind down. We have 3 more shows to go, and that's it for the 2023 season. Today, we want to take on the issue of racism and media. And Dr. Brad Clark from Mount Royal University has done some research to amplify things we knew, but even more to bring to light the things we didn't see or were not shown. Hang around, because that comes up a little bit, because that forms part of the discussion in a little bit in A Time to Reason with the big man himself. Yes, Donovan Simon. But before we go any further, we want to go to my favorite part of the show. Yes, you know what that is. It is patois time. And this is a time where we share a word or a phrase from the beautiful Jamaican patois. And today we're going to go with a phrase. And the phrase or proverb or whatever it is we call it, sayings, is chicken Mary ark the near. Yes, chicken Mary ark the near. When your mother or your granny or somebody said that to you as a child, what does that mean? So you do that by telling me, engage with me and tell me in the comments. Yes, it's that little box down below. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, just comment and keep the thing lively and going. And the saying or the phrase or the verb or the proverb this week is chicken Mary ark the near. Yes, I love that one. So tell me what it means and if you've ever heard it before. Last week, we got some fresh perspectives from our proud Jamaican professionals, Janelle and Candice. They shared how they felt about their prospects, how they see the work world, and the things they love or would change about the work world in Jamaica. Even though Janelle works in Canada and Candice is in Jamaica, there were many similarities in their views. They both remained positive, passionate, and proud as they built their careers, even if in some cases it felt slow and constantly had to challenge the legacy practices. You know, we like it when we love it when you engage with us. And you do that by keeping the comments and the feedback coming. And you do that again just by commenting below in your little box down there if you're on YouTube or on Facebook. If you missed an episode, please check out the replay on What a Gwaan YouTube channel or on our Facebook. You can find the links to those on our website at www.whatagwaan.ca. And I forgot to remind you earlier that Gwaan is 2 A's. And while we're on the grain of social media, yes, I want you to share, follow, like, comment, do all the things so that Watagua National can spread all over. So when you like or comment, if you're already following us, it does something to the algorithm and it shows up on your page. Then all the people who are following you or doing whatever they do to you on social media, yes, they'll see it and then they can get to check out Watagua National, and it helps to grow our viewership and our overall thingies, right? So please remember to share it like good food. So it's now time to share some events happening across Canada. In Toronto, the Jamaican Canadian Association is in the process of designing a culturally appropriate adult literacy program, and they need your input. Join them on a Zoom call on Wednesday, October 11th at 6 p.m. EST for a virtual focus group. To join the session, RSVP at iscoordinator@jcaontario.org or call 647-765-5304. Over in Montreal, you can sign up for the online computer classes for older adults offered by Starcan Cultural Association and the Jamaican Association of Montreal. This is a free 10-week online program that will help to demystify the world of computers, devices, and software for our adults. Register by October 12 by calling 514-998-7827 or 514-737-8229. Sessions start on October 17. Also in Montreal, the Jamaican Association of Montreal is hosting their Heroes and Heroine Day 2023 banquet on Saturday, October 14 at the Jam Noel Alexander Banquet Hall at 4065 Jean Talon West, Montreal. The event starts at 6 p.m. with Bishop Ransford Jones as the guest speaker. There will be awards, guest appearances, entertainment, and more. Tickets are $90 for members and $100 for non-members. Call 514-737-8229 for tickets and more information. Now, just a little tips and news from Dongayard. Jamaicans spend billions on telephone call tax, but data service starting to squeeze revenue. Jamaican consumers have proved that talk is not cheap, forking out almost $50 billion in telephone call taxes for the government's coffers over the last decade. Wow. But at least one technology expert believes the outlay could have been much more if the Office of Utilities Regulation, OUR, properly monitors the calls made on the networks of telecoms providers. The government in 2012, as part of measures to raise taxes for paying down the debt ahead of new agreement with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, announced a tax of 30 cents per minute on all domestic calls for termination to the mobile networks and fixed lines. On international calls, the tax implemented was US 0.75. Oh my God, I don't know my numbers, but I think this is 75 cents per minute for calls terminated on local mobile networks. Since the implementation of the tax in August 2012 up to March 31st, 2023, the telecos have handed over 47.8 billion in telephone call taxes, which, though a hefty sum, was still 1.36 billion lower than the government had hoped.
Africa Fashion Week London is back. The largest annual fashion week in Europe, profiling African-inspired designs in its entirety, invites you to its spectacular two-day event. Whether you want to network with fashion industry gurus or wish to purchase a one-of-a-kind Afrocentric memento in our renowned exhibition marketplace, Africa Fashion Week London promises to immerse you in all things Africa and more. Tickets are selling fast now. Get your tickets at eventbrite.co.uk. Also, don't miss the opportunity to showcase or exhibit your designs at the Fashion Week. Register now at africafashionweeklondonuk.com. Africa Fashion Week London. Book your tickets now.
Oh, hey, and we are now at my next favorite part of the show. Yes, you know what it is. It is a time to reason with none other than the big man himself, Donovan Simon. So grab some tough crackers, a piece of hard bread, little chocolate tea, little cocoa tea, and come back, sit down, because it's now time to all a little reason.
This has been a great discussion. David, thanks for taking the time. All right.
What's up, Ms. Nicole?
Yeah.
Why do you recommend hardo bread?
I don't know. It just sounds like the right thing, you know, when you go all a reason. It sounds like
But it's 7 o'clock in the evening.
right, Friday.
Like Bongo Town of them time don't eat hardo
No, but
bread.
you know, Jamaicans we not cook on Friday, so it sounds
Yeah, but
like
you don't eat hardo bread Friday evening.
yes, you eat hardware bread. Of course, you eat hardware bread.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
little one kind of tin of sardine or some tin mackerel or some pick up
Boom.
saltfish and tomato or something.
I hear you. Well, it's Thanksgiving weekend. Well, let's hope you have a little bit more than sardine and mackerel fish.
I'll give thanks for whatever I
Whatever it is, you know, we're going to deal with it. Today we have a little reasoning about Black images and Black people in the media, and I thought, you know, this one is going to be, I think, is going to be interesting because there's some things that, you know, who knew that that's how things happen behind the scenes. So I'm going to have a chat with Dr. Clark.
Yeah, man.
And then we touch base a little more.
All right, cool. Have a good.
Welcome to another Time to Reason here on Gwaan. My name is Donovan, and it's always a pleasure to have you with us. Today, we're going to touch on another topic that sometimes people don't want to touch. It's about racism and how Black people are represented, or Black images are represented in the media. And a few months ago, I had a chance to listen to a lecture given by the guest that we have today that focused on that here in Canada. And I thought it'd be useful to have him share some of his research and experience with us here on Gwaan. Dr. Brad Clark, he's been a journalist for a long time, over 20 years. He's been in print, he's been in broadcasting, spent some time at the CBC here in Canada. He's also been in academia. He's a teacher. He's a professor at the Mount Royal University here in Calgary. And primarily why he's here is because one of the products of his research is a book entitled Journalism's Racial Reckoning, the news media's pivot to diversity and inclusion. He's done many things over the last couple of years to look at equity, inclusion, and diversity in news, social media, and esports. And I think he's going to add some value to our conversation today. It's my pleasure to introduce and ask Dr. Brad Clark to join me here on stage.
Pleasure to be here, Donovan.
Hey, how have you been? I won't ask you about the coaching.
Well, it was our first look at the team, and I don't know if it's just because they're older and bigger, but man, they looked really good. So I'm kind of excited.
All right, early season. All right, listen, we're here to talk about Black images, racism, and how the media presents it. And your work opened up, for some people, a light on the things that are happening within media. Maybe where we should start is a little bit of some expansion on your work, your observation. What were some of the things that came out of that research?
Right. So my research really started with George Floyd's murder, and sort of what came after that, with the rise of Black Lives Matter, with institutions being held to account. Among those institutions was the journalism industry, the news business, and what started to come out at that time, I think it was true across many institutional lines. People were willing to speak out about their experiences, racialized people, indigenous people, and people in the news business were really outspoken about the nature of the hurdles they had faced as practitioners. So what they were often talking about were their experiences both in the newsroom and in regard to the content that they saw created on a daily basis in those newsrooms. And you know, the big theme through their experience in both those areas was really the prevalence of systemic racism and the way it was shaping their interactions with managers and supervisors, the people who are sort of the gatekeepers within the newsroom for the stories that make it into the mainstream spotlight, and their experiences with colleagues in sort of the day-to-day operations of news, whether it was things like microaggressions, being mistaken for another person of color, or managers not being able to pronounce their names, or on a kind of a bigger level, the fact that they were expected to be the ones who led often the volunteer work within the organization related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. So the burden of improving representation often falls on racialized people and indigenous people who work in the newsroom. So they started speaking out about that, and as they started to speak out in a variety of forums, I just started tracking it because I was interested in it from the perspective of my own research and education and sharing it with my students. So I was just following it from that perspective. But after several weeks and then into the summer, I realized I had dozens and dozens of accounts from racialized and indigenous journalists, people working in the news business, of what their experiences were. So I decided to do some analysis of that and break it down. So that's kind of the work in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, I'll come back to some of the details around your research, Brad. But the general topic, we talk about Black practitioners in media. People have been in media for a long time. I was thinking as we prepared for this about Oprah. Oprah's been around and has become famous and all the rest of it, but we never heard these stories coming from those sources.
Yeah. The only place you kind of heard these stories was kind of in the world of academic research, where researchers were interrogating race in newsrooms, race in media, and so there, that was kind of the only place you would counter it. It didn't really make it into the mainstream in a big way, and that was what was so significant about the racial reckoning in 2020, that it started to make it into mainstream news coverage. So I think the reason it hadn't come out is just coming back to the practices around journalism and who they have been controlled, who shaped them and determined them over the decades and maybe over the almost 2 centuries, I guess, that we've had journalism of some sort. So if you look at that, especially looking at Canada or the United States, we're looking at white settler states, exclusionary states, that the link between institutions and power in society, whether it's governments or universities or hospitals or the media, it's all been white dominated, and so it's those perspectives that have shaped the ideals of everything in society, but journalism as well. And so one journalistic ideal that I think people are really familiar with is the notion of objectivity, but objectivity is a European, it's a white notion, and it downplays other perspectives, and so objectivity through the years really came very much to be interpreted from the perspective from a white lens, from the view of sort of white Europeans and what they perceived to be objectivity. And I as a journalism professor, I have really grave concerns about notions of objectivity informing how we practice. There's certainly room for lots of neutrality and approaching stories from a position of not being biased, but objectivity, and this is what I found in my study, objectivity has often been trotted out as a way to control particularly Black journalists, to say, well, not everything's about race. You're bringing up this story. Not everything's about race. Like, can you move on to something else now? And that's not very objective on your part. You've got a stake in this as a Black person, and you want to talk about this issue facing Blacks in society. So that's kind of what had happened. What's interesting is nobody ever had a problem with white journalists going and covering the issue facing largely white suburban Canada or the United States. No one would say, oh, you live in suburbia, you're another white suburbanite, you can't go cover that story, you're biased. And so that's I think part of the reason we don't see, or we didn't see more of the prominent Black journalists sort of more outspoken, and because even I think they have been controlled to a certain extent in what they would say.
Right. How has, if any at all, the George Floyd riots, the Black Lives Matter, Me Too, how has that, if any at all, affected media and the whole issue of systemic racism?
I think it depends on which media organization you look at. So I think there are some examples where news media organizations had their feet held to the fire and really kind of embraced equity, diversity, and inclusion in a sincere way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, one example of this is the Los Angeles Times. So I'll use the Los Angeles Times as an American example, and I'll bring in a Canadian example as well. But the Los Angeles Times, you know, working in perhaps one of the most diverse cities in North America, if you think about all the different immigrant communities that live there, hasn't done a very good job over its history in representing its constituents, particularly the different ethnic groups that make up large parts of Los Angeles. And so through the racial reckoning, a lot of LA Times reporters started to speak out about their experience. Black journalists, black news editors, and what they had seen over the years. And with a lot of what happened through the racial reckoning, there was initially some pushback from management, but then management really started to recognize that there was something there, something more than they had really been willing to consider before. And so the LA Times started to make some really important decisions around hiring and structuring their newsroom and their newspaper to start to better reflect segments of the society, whether it was Black communities or Asian communities, or components of the Hispanic community. There were starting to be more and more recognition of this, and so as while they were doing that, they also started to make way for more content that related to those communities, not in a superficial way, like you know, celebrating Chinese New Year, but finding people and finding stories, finding people to report on those stories in those communities, and then they started to embark on, I think, what was a really important part of the process. They set out to set the record straight on a lot of the racial coverage that they had been doing over the decades, and so they tapped specific Black journalists and Asian journalists and Latinx journalists to write about the ways that the LA Times had covered those communities in the past, and how those were wrong. And on top of that, they had a special section that featured a bunch of these stories, and they had an editorial written by the editor of the newspaper, Sewell Chan. He's not there anymore, but he wrote this really significant and sort of detailed all the ways that the LA Times had been racist for years and years, and cited those examples, and it was a way of kind of taking some accountability for what had been done in the past, and a promise to do better in the future. And you know, an organization that did something similar to that was the Winnipeg Free Press. They also did an op-ed and recognized the way that their reporting had been racist in the past, and so you know, what I took from that was a really sincere accounting for what had come before, and I don't think you can move forward on improving your track record, on improving your coverage, if you don't acknowledge what came before. Right. There have been other newspapers in the United States that have done this in the past, not tied to George Floyd's murder, but in years previous. And I think it was the Kansas City Star. They did that, and I remember a line from, I think, one of their editorials, and it was something along the lines of, it was recently brought to our attention that there was a civil rights movement in the United States. We regret that we forgot to cover it. Something along those lines. And so it's been done in the past, but not very much. So those are where organizations have been sincere about it and have moved forward with what I think you could look at some sound EDI principles. I think there's been some progress. But if you pick up a newspaper, just about any of the Post-Media newspapers, Post-Media did very little, gave barely a nod to anything related to the racial reckoning. And in spite of the fact that the world has moved on in many respects, on any given day or weekend, you can find a editorial in particular, tends to be opinion based in the Post-Media newspapers. You can find an opinion piece that's incredibly racist, particularly toward indigenous people, but really towards newcomers and people of color as well.
What is the basis, in your opinion, for some of the resistance that you have possibly seen as you've gone through your research to the acknowledgement and instituting changes in the way many of these media houses reflect Black and Indigenous topics and peoples?
I think so much of it just stems from a really narrow view of the world, and people who are kind of stuck in the past and stuck in their own perspectives and really struggle with what should be one of the most powerful motivations for good journalism, and that's representing your audience, representing not just a select set of voices, but voices across the spectrum of the community you serve. And I think there's fear. I think there's an arrogance that perpetuates some of the stick-to-itiveness of refusing to embrace just really authentic and accurate representation.
Yeah. And I mean, in some cases you could default to the fact that who pays the piper calls the tune, right?
Yeah. And that's true. And for some media organizations, it's shareholders in a way
Right.
that is really contrary to the journalistic mission. So who's your master to an extent, if you know what I mean?
Right.
Like are you beholden to the public? Because that public service ideal is really important, or has been in journalism's ethics. If you're beholden to shareholders, then it's all about clickbait and driving traffic and selling advertising and there's some interesting arguments around the bottom line and diversity.
Yeah.
And like I've been sort of looking at this area since I sort of started working at a university, in the academy since around 2006. But even back then, there were professional organizations trying to make the case for diversity by saying, it's good business, and then citing what the spending capacity is in the billions of dollars for racialized people and indigenous people and different cultural groups, and it's a bit cynical, but it's a legitimate argument. And I was actually talking about this with my students in class just this week. We were looking at a little bit about representation in advertising, you know, it wasn't until 1963 that the first major companies started to advertise, have advertising directed towards Black people in the United States. And that was Pepsi in 1963. But today there's much more recognition that advertising that has diverse themes in it, that targets people of color and LGBTQ2S plus and people with disabilities, that advertising is reaching those populations in a way that's profitable. But it's also engaging with a younger demographic that appreciates those values as well. So you know, news is a bit bigger ship, I guess, to try and turn. But advertising seems to have done a little bit better job of embracing some of these values.
Well, at the end of the day, it's a business. I'm going to come to teaching and curriculum in a little bit, but I want to go back a little to the issue of North America, United States versus Canada.
Yeah.
Were there any major similarities or differences that you identified as part of that research in putting out Racial Reckoning that you want to speak to?
There weren't many differences, to be honest. I mean, you know, when I think about some of the experiences identified by Black journalists in Canada, they're very, very similar to the experiences of Black journalists in the United States. So for example, I can recall a story of one Black journalist covering a police shooting in Baltimore, and going down and doing some reporting, and she interviewed two young Black men who shared lots with her with the experiences they had with police, and she dutifully, you know, took down all their contact information. And when she came back to Canada and to put her story together, her editor was giving her grief that you know, did she really know who these sources were, and you know, how could she trust that these stories were authentic? And it's like, well, why would you doubt that? And you know, and so you know, very similar experience to what a lot of Black journalists in big cities in the U.S. face. There's, I mean, where what I saw different in Canada was, I would say that there's a lot more racism directed towards indigenous people here. They're a bigger segment of the population, and indigenous journalists trying to report on, for example, the report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The report actually used the word genocide, and yet white news editors would give the Indigenous reporters grief for trying to use the word genocide in their copy. They were quoting the report, and so it's things like that that I saw a lot of through the Racial Reckoning. But you know, in sometimes in class and sometimes in discussions with colleagues, I think a lot of people like to think that Canada's better than the U.S. when it comes to racism, and you know, I would say from using the lens of my research, I don't think that's true. I think we have many issues that are similar. We have kind of slightly different populations, but I think you know, what drives the issues we see are kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Let's shift a little to academia, and you're a professor, you're teaching students all the time. How has some of this research and the things you've been looking on for a long time, how does that influence your curriculum and the way you approach teaching diversity in media today?
I think it's the foundation for all my teaching. Like what I've seen in my research, it's the foundation for all the courses I teach and how I teach. It's not how I started out, but like I'm very aware of what scholars I'm highlighting and centering in my work, and I try to be inclusive in the academic voices I include in my teaching, and at the same time, when I'm using media examples, I reach out for not just the cool story that might excite students, but like the cool story that a Black journalist put together, or an Indigenous journalist put together, so that so that we're modeling and normalizing people telling stories who aren't white,
right?
So it kind of serves a couple of purposes there. There's that aspect of it. There's also the aspect that often the stories are more authentic. They're deeper. They have better understanding of the issues, and make connections to the community that might not be there if the reporter wasn't a person of color, for example. So those are some of the things I try and bring to the class, and then I try to the expression we've used at Mount Royal is decolonize the curriculum. So that's part of that process, but part of it is thinking about the nature of your assignments. So I teach a course called Media and Inclusion, and we're actually studying this stuff in that course, but what I also do in that course is produce a podcast,
right,
based on diversity themes, so that students are put in the position of having to represent groups that they may not necessarily be associated with, so that they start to understand the way some of the issues around production when you're talking to a community that you may not belong to, and so if they're doing a story about a First Nation issue and are reaching out to an elder, that they understand the nuances of reaching out to an elder and ensuring that you're following proper protocols and that kind of thing. So those are kind of the ways that I try and bring it to my teaching.
How has social media, if any, influenced how that curriculum and those practices are translated? Because social media seems to have opened up the window to all and sundry for news, quasi-news, and entertainment.
Yeah, for better and worse, for sure. But for better, what's happened is social media has given forums for Indigenous people and racialized people and other equity deserving groups to put their stories out before a big audience, a mass audience, without having to go through the traditional media gatekeepers. And so we've seen that with, we saw that with Me Too to a certain extent, but we also saw it with Idle No More. I actually did a research project for a book chapter I wrote on the Canada 150. So the 150th anniversary of Canadian Confederation. And what happened in that story was indigenous leaders across Canada, as we were getting closer to the date for that anniversary, started to share all the ways that it was not something to be celebrated, that the colonization, the impact of colonization on their peoples, and even on newcomers, started they started to use social media to get this message out, and in time, the social media message started to get picked up by the mainstream. And so you started to see stories in the Toronto Star or the Guardian related to this Canada 150 resistance movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time you came around to July 1st, 2017, the tone of Canada 150 was quite a bit different. Mm-hmm. If you remember, on Parliament Hill, Justin Trudeau was making some celebratory remarks, but was also acknowledging an Indigenous encampment on
Mm-hmm.
Parliament Hill and the concerns and issues that had been raised through the course of the Resistance 150 movement. So social media has had that capacity. Social media, I think it still tilts towards the powerful in really profound ways, but it does offer the opportunity for equity deserving groups to get their message out and potentially ultimately shape the narrative, as we saw with Canada 150.
Brad, as the changes occur, because I think you have acknowledged that some media houses and the mainstream generally is acknowledging the need for these changes. Is there an acceptance on the other side, meaning the racialized, the indigenous groups, etc., of this change as some form of atonement and a good way forward? What have you seen, and what does your research say?
My sense is that there's justifiable skepticism, and people are waiting to see more. And I think that's valid. I was speaking to a young First Nations woman just the other day. She had been to Mount Royal and completed a diploma program and worked in the media for a time. Really, really gifted, really, and she's come back to university now. And she was telling me about some of her experiences working in the media and trouble she had getting her news editors, her bosses, to listen to her ideas around stories about First Nations communities and issues. And it was just so much of a struggle and so frustrating for her. Her comment to me was, no wonder we all quit. And so that's been an ongoing issue for the racialized and Indigenous journalists that have come through the newsrooms over the years, and because they haven't been listened to, they don't stick around. And so we've never seen a really significant rise through the ranks into the supervisor roles. And that's something that sort of gets called out repeatedly is, why aren't there more people of color in the upper ranks of news organizations? Well, it's because nobody wants to work there if you're racialized, because right. It's been such a battle to get your views and opinions respected. I think, having said that, I have seen some improvements in coverage. Mm-hmm. There's an Indigenous reporter based in Vancouver who I saw a post on social media that, in 2010, they wouldn't do a story on this. In 2015, they didn't do this, but in 2022, they're letting me do this story. And so she said something like that's progress. And so I think there is recognition of this. Canada has never been more diverse.
Right.
And it's not going to go the other way. like the world is becoming more and more diverse, and so you can either get on board or get off, because that's where we're headed. So I think that there are some people who are pleased with the progress that's been made, but I also think it's kind of a case by case thing. Some organizations have embraced it more than others, and just seems like we always see the pendulum swing too. We saw this pendulum swing one way in 2020, and then has swung back in a pretty sharp way. Especially in the United States, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, more to be done.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as we look at the clock and wrap up here. So when we look at the future, you kind of started that just now.
Yeah.
There's always been, for the last 15, 20 years, the question of media and digital transformation and the obsolescence of newspapers, the rise of social media, and the new world. But we're having this conversation while talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. When you translate your research for the next 20, 30 years, what do you see?
I think that audiences, if not journalists and if not news leaders, are going to hold news media to account more and more. And if they're not seeing better representation, they'll stick to TikTok. They'll stick to their Instagram feed, and you referenced digital transformation. Obviously, it's had such a spectacular influence on news media and where we are. It seems like every other day we're hearing about newsroom closure or another news media organization shutting down. So there's financial pressure to find sustainable ways, sustainable from an economic point of view, of producing news. And I think there's a perception that somehow diversity is expensive, but that's not the case. It's like I'm hoping that where we're if we're not there, where we're going is that diversity and inclusion is part of the journalism ethics that shape where we're going and what our content ought to look like. And so to get there, we need to have diverse voices in the newsroom. We need those voices to tell the stories of other diverse voices. So I think that and maybe this is wishful thinking, or just maybe I'm just way too much of an optimist, but I think the younger generation embrace this in ways that my generation didn't. And so I think there's an opportunity for, as the next generation of young reporters start to hit the newsrooms, that they recognize how important this is. And for white journalists, that's making space for other journalists of color and indigenous journalists, but it's also recognizing that you can't go to the same sources all the time. Recognizing that you need more than the dominant perspective in your reporting, and that was one of the things that was pointed out with issues in content is how stories about communities could be told without a single voice from that community making it into the content.
Right.
And there were some really terrible examples of that. So I think the journalism is getting stronger, and I also think that there's recognition that this is now part of our ethical foundation, and that we can't move ahead. We're not going to be serving the public. We're not going to be meeting our ideals as journalists. We're not going to be serving anybody if we can't incorporate this.
Well, on that note, we're gonna put a wrap on it. This was fantastic. Dr. Brad Clark, author of Journalism's Racial Reckoning, the news media's pivot to diversity and inclusion. Brad, thanks for joining us here on What a Gwaan.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Okay.
This has been a great discussion. David, thanks for taking the time. All right.
Welcome back.
Indeed.
Yep.
Lots of learning.
And lots.
Who would have thought? It's a lot of people might not know, for the people watching this. So I did a first degree in communications. Shout out to all the people who went to Carmack at the University of the West Indies. I would have never imagined that some of the things Brad was talking about happened in the media houses. That said, I hope everybody who listens to this, watches this. Media is what is made somewhere. It's manufactured no different than a smoothie or a cup of coffee.
Yep.
The guys inside the media house determines what the news is. They determine what flavor the news is.
Yes.
They determine how it smells, how it looks, and what shape it takes. And it requires a certain amount of governance, integrity, and all kinds of factors for it to come out in a particular way.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how sometimes you take it for granted about how the images look or what they sound like, and you wonder why. And I think the research is speaking to
definitely
a current that has been going on for a long time.
Yeah.
That puts Black, indigenous, racialized, and I like the word that he used, equity deserving
groups
in a particular light.
Yeah.
So yeah. Who knew? And some people get big and make money out of it and totally ignore some of those issues, right?
And that's where the problem lies. Oftentimes ask for, we'll say, oh, we need women in these spaces. Oh, we need racialized or equity deserving folks in these spaces. And oftentimes they get there, and somewhere along the line is that they forget their woman or they're racialized, and they start just walking in the same grain of other people. It's like, when you go to school and you get ragging, you can't wait to reach to a higher grade to start.
So you can rag,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. And it's true. And you wonder why some of the stories haven't changed over time. And I'm not saying there hasn't been change.
Right.
Because I think you see more images, you see more people in these spaces, but you can't help but question, why haven't we made more progress?
Yeah.
Right? Anyway,
Yes.
Another reasoning is done.
Another good one. Yes, another good one.
All right, take it easy. See you next week.
All right, cool. Yeah, man. See you. Okay, folks, I hope you listened. I hope you were taking all what was said into consideration. And it was another good reason. Very, very good reason. I hope the tea lasts long enough for you to enjoy the conversation right throughout. And I hope you listened and you're taking some notes and you're putting it down. Again, back to my patois time. It says Chicken Mary out the near. And you know when your granny or your mother say that, it mean danger lurk. So while you're busy out to do a ramp and a gill off a pea soup, hey, something always go wrong. 90% of the time, you know, you always end up buck your toe, you cut your foot, you drop off a sitting, something happen. So is that whenever you're very, when it's a chicken Mary out the near, it means danger lurks while you're busy celebrating. So if you haven't heard this one in a long time, see, I bring it back. For those of us who work in spaces where we don't work around many Jamaicans, folks who don't really get it. But hey, feel free to just drop it in the middle of the conversation and just leave it right there and let it marinate, right? So chicken Mary out the near. So that is our term for this week. So next week's show, we are going to again be focusing on our Black folks. So this one we'll be looking at art in the Black community. And this one will focus on a Montreal story. So next week we go local. Yeah, we're going out east and we look at a project that fuses being Black with a community organization. We'll have the president of the Jamaican Association of Montreal and Sharon Nelson, director of their art project. They will be joining us to dive into what makes this program so important to not just artists, but the Jamaican and Black community in Montreal. This is going to be another very interesting discussion. So please plan to join us. All right. You can now share your message on Watagwan National while we share our stories and experiences. Advertise with us as we grow. Contact us via watagwan.ca or our social media handles, and those are Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our website. And as usual, remember that Gwaan is 2 A's. You can connect with us through email at watagwancnd@gmail.com and also send us a message on any of our social media platforms. So again, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and you can connect with any of those through our website at www.watagwan.ca. Yes, Lilith, you're there back again. Wagwan, Auntie Lil. Glad to see you giving the shout out as usual. All right. So remember, we want Watagwan National to spread. We want it to go everywhere in our world. Just like we share good food, share our social media handles. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share the link when you subscribe to your friends. Like and comment on our Facebook and Instagram platforms, and that will allow it to appear on your screen. So all your other people who are following you or friends on your platform will then see it, and Watagwan National will be truly national. We've come to the end of another wonderful show, and I hope you learned and you had good time. But plan to join us next week as we come back. Your girl from Bongo Town is taking another Friday off. Happy Thanksgiving for those who are celebrating and live in Canada. But walk good. See you in the next week.